Hello, I'm Steph from iDriver Classic, and today we are looking at the Triumph GT6. Now you'll remember way back when we did a video on a Triumph GT6 before. However, when Alex and Callum bought this, I just had to get it on the channel. It's got such great provenance to it. It's one of the last 15 that came off the production line. So it was registered in 1974. And the best bit about it is Alex and Callum are only the second owners on the car because it has been off the road in dry storage somewhere since 1978. This car is fantastically original and it's going to give us a great feel for what it must have been like way back when people first took a GT6 out for a drive and fell in love with Triumph. Now I'm really excited to take you out in today's video, and if you've never watched one of these before, you're in for a treat. We're going to have a look under the bonnet, we get to look through the dash and see what's on offer for the driver and of course the passenger, and we get to look at that engine and we get to hear it roar, and then we take it out on a test drive. So buckle up because today we're discovering the Triumph GT6. 1966 is a great year. There's a big win for England's football team. Alongside 33 goals at the Commonwealth Games for the Olympic team, Heinz are running their competition to win one of 57 convertible Hornets, and of course, Triumph unveiled their new sports car, the Triumph GT6. Now listen, the GT6 wasn't a completely all-new invention, and the early cars were first seen at the Earl's Motor Show, where the car was fitted with the 95 brake horsepower engine borrowed from the Vitesse. It's a 1998cc unit. Although it was never fitted as standard, overdrive was available as an option from launch, whilst the bumpers and lighting were borrowed from the Spitfire of the time, which isn't really surprising because if you know the story from the last video I did on these, Michelotti had borrowed a Spitfire 4 and that's how all this came to plan. So really, when you hear me talk about how the Spitfire is linked in with this, none of it should come as a surprise. Now the car does well. Not well enough, Triumph are hoping that the sales are going to be better, but still, in 1968, they decided to come to the market with the Mark II, which is a decent step up to say it's only been 2 years since the initial launch. The car was designed with a new dash, revised cylinder head, and a slight update to the rear suspension. The car's fitted with the Rotoflex couplings and wishbones to rear suspension. There's also styling tweaks from the Mark I to the Mark II, and you'll know this if you're a really big fan of these. So the louvers on the side of the bonnet get removed, and then there's raised bumpers to front and rear, and of course the rose style wheel trims as well. Between the Mark II and the Mark III, you do also see a few other bits that Triumph draft in to improve the cars. Now I suspect that some of these are driven by the American market, including the interior padding getting a plusher feel, a revised steering wheel and the strengthened structure, which is specifically drafted in to meet the American regulations, which by the way were much tougher than they were here in the UK. You see a lot of this elsewhere as well, so even as early as when they take Morris Minors from low lights to highlights and drafting in rubber bumpers on the Triumph cars. All of these things are done to meet the American regulations. But anyway, that's by the by. Now the Mark III we're testing here today came to market in 1970, and unlike the Mark II where there were big changes, the Mark III has a revised bonnet, a little bit of update to the rear panels, and what is clearly, in my opinion, some sort of cost-cutting measure, because one of the changes to the rears does away with some of the chrome that you see on the Mark II. In 1973, the last year of the car, you see a brake servo fitted and the rear brakes are increased in size. And for the last of the car, you also see the Rotoflex done away with, and they bring in that swing spring rear axle, which I think is used on the Spitfire of the time, and again I think that's derived from the Herald in some way. I just know that it wasn't completely new to the car, so really there is a lot borrowed from elsewhere in the Triumph range. Now whilst this was pitched against the MGB, and a lot of people see it even today as a competitor when you're looking for which sports car to buy, there aren't masses of the GT6 ever made, and in fact there's less than 41,000 which were made, with just over 13,000 of the model that we're testing here today. It was beaten in sales by the MGB, but how does it fare today, and which is the better of the 60s and 70s sports car? Well, let's take a closer look and find out, and personally I would be interested to hear your view in the comments section below. Is there anything that feels more deliciously 70s than one of these wood dashes with all the black plastic dials? I absolutely love it. It's definitely a preference of mine. I don't know about you at home. Now you've got everything you need inside this GT6. You've got your heater vents to your left and to your right. Into the centre here, you've got all your heater controls. You come down into your reheated screen. You've got the light switches. This one is for the interior light. I thought this was part of the headlights. So you've got your lights here. Everything all laid out exactly as you'd hope for. And by the way, something I should probably say is with these switches, they feel really sturdy, which is so nice because there are so many 70s vehicles that you get in, and I've talked about this before, where they just feel really flimsy and you think, I hope I don't break that on test. Anyway, in terms of your gauges, you've got a temperature gauge, you've got fuel gauge to centre, and then straight in front of you, you've got exactly what you'd expect. So you've got your speedo, which runs up to 140, and remember, you get over 100 miles per hour out of these, so we could definitely be getting close to that 140, especially if someone's played about the engine. And over on the right-hand side, you have got the rev counter. Just between that, you've got the hazard warning switch, and do you know what? That is such a great thing that you start seeing in 70s vehicles, because you don't realise how much you need hazard warning lights until you need them. You just think, oh no, you can survive without. We broke down the Morris Minor the other day and I just so wished that we had some. Over from there, you've got your wiper switches, and on the left hand side you've got your choke, and then you've got your two stalks here. So on the left, that's for your main beam, and then on the right hand side, that is for your indicators. So it's probably exactly as you'd expect. You've got 4 forward gears on this. Now I know that a lot of these, and a really big popular upgrade at the time, was to go for overdrive. This hasn't got overdrive fitted, but hey, we get the real experience as I guess Triumph intended it to be, because a lot of people you see with the optional upgrade, but it's actually something that it wasn't one of those things that was kind of an automatic, which a lot of people think, that was just chucked on. It was something that you did have to spend considerable extra money for. Coming down from there, you've got a panel. Now this panel, I think, is where you would have had your stereo put in, but again, there's no stereo, and that's how it would have been from the factory. And then just up here, you've got your ashtray. Now you don't have a glove box in this, which I'm absolutely fine with. It's one of those things, you've just got a little parcel shelf over there. But apart from that, that is pretty much everything we've got. Now I know that you are dying to hear that engine because it looked so good under the bonnet. And that 2 litre straight 6 engine is just a dream. Hold on, just check me neutral. It sounds really beefy when you're inside. Have a listen. That's great. Let's have a listen from the outside, and then we're going to take it out on a drive. Right, let's go on an adventure. And that, my friends at home, is us up into that top gear, which is 4th gear. Now I could see exactly why Alex and Callum bought this car. It is exceptional. And I tend to find that if you take out a car where it's had a really low number of owners, you can feel it in every way on a car, because they just don't feel very messed around with, and this feels just absolutely delightful as you drive. And remember, we've got 95 brake horsepower, top speed of 112 miles per hour, which we're definitely not hitting with all these speed cameras today, and it's 0 to 60 in 10.1 seconds. So when you get into a GT6, it really is a sports car, because I think quite a lot of people get this horrible misconception, because there was some sort of press article that came out at the time that said, oh, it's a poor man's E-Type, and I despise when people do stuff like that. Oh, it's a poor man's this, it's a poor man's that. No, a car can be enjoyed completely in its own right. It doesn't need to be compared to something that costs so much more money. I mean, realistically, if you're looking at competitors for something like this, it's an MGB. And then of course with this, you do only get the hard top. But for me, that's not a problem, because I don't know about you at home, but I prefer a hard top, because the minute that you step into convertible, yeah, it's nice on a warm day, but look, when you've got fair skin like mine, not only are you battling sunburn in summer, but you're then battling a constant draft in winter. So I much prefer a hard top. So for me, that certainly wouldn't have been a drawback. And I do really like the shape of these, and I'd love to know if you do as well, because of course it is a Michelotti design, and he just, the man was a genius. You look at his designs and you look at everything he drew, and it's just art. It just goes on so much more than a car. Now, I don't know if you've been able to see, as I seem to have been blocked from reaching my limits by every single red light as we come down here, but the brakes on this are absolutely superb. Now, I was talking to you about the brakes when we were looking round, but really, what is a brake like? Because until you're in it, you don't really get a full feel for it. And these are so good. I mean, when I say they're so good, they've actually made me think I should probably check the brakes on the Proton, because I applied as much force on the brake pedal in this as I did in the Proton, and nearly shot myself into the next postcode. I thought, blimey, these are a force to be reckoned with. But I guess when you're able to go over a ton, you probably do need a bit of stopping power behind you. But what is it like to drive? Well, if you read reviews from the time, all the journalists raved about how light the steering was and how easy the handling was, and I would concur on that. The handling on this is lovely. And remember, if we're looking at competitors, we're looking at something like the MGB, I think this gives a far more pleasurable driving experience than the MGB, and I prefer the look of it as well. However, I do prefer a B series engine, so really I do like a little bit of best of both worlds. However, as you cruise along, you cannot believe how many people are double taking, because whilst it's a delight to sit inside, and I think that it's a nice layout inside here with plenty of space around you, it's also an attractive car to look at from the outside as well. So really, it's an all-rounder. In terms of space around you, the last time I drove one of these, I was a hell of a lot bigger. I reckon I probably was about 10 stone heavier. And I think I remarked at the time that it didn't feel like there was much room inside. I'm obviously now a lot smaller, and I would say that it was probably down to me, it wasn't down to the car, because now I've got it this time, it feels really spacious and I'm really enjoying it. So it's funny really to come back and test some of these cars in a different body, because it gives you a different perspective. But if you yourself are in a larger body, you might find that the space in the MGB and just how everything is laid out is a little bit more accommodating to a wider girth than perhaps this. This felt a wee bit tight when I was at my biggest. Goodness me, what else have I got to point out for you? Well, I'm just enjoying the whole experience really. It's a really comfy car to sit in. Quite often you will get into something that has been designed for raciness or sexiness, and then you find that they've compromised on something like a layout or a seating position or something like that. Whereas in this, these seats are so comfortable, I've got lots of space around me, I've got a great armrest that I can rest my arm on, and it's just nice. The only thing I would say is that at 5'3", I do have the seat adjusted all the way forward. So if you are shorter than me and you're a 5-footer or maybe a little bit smaller, you might need to make a few adjustments before you drive one. So if you're going out to test drive one, it is worth having a look at. Now remember, there are plenty of buying guides on these online, and each model differs from Mark 1, and they're quite rare, because I think there's only about 16,000 of those made, right through to the Mark 3. So each of them have their own foibles and things that you need to look out for. So if you are going to buy one of these, make sure you do have a look at the correct buying guide for the correct mark, because they do change as you go through the time. Now I think I'm going to be a little bit naughty and head out to the M62 and put my foot down and have a little bit of fun on my own without a camera on and see what this car is really made of. But for you at home, it's time for you to crack on with something else. Maybe check out one of the other videos if you haven't seen yesterday's. And until next time, take care and drive safely.